Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Regina Graves SDSA, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with set decorators Jille, Aziz, and Ellie Griff, and also production designer Arthur Max of Gladiator II. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you, and so glad to speak about this epic movie. 15 years after, we ended it in the Coliseum, but almost 25 years from the first Gladiator. There's so much to talk about. But I'd really like to open up with Jille and Ellie. Our viewers really love to hear how decorators got into the business and how you got your start, how it all came about. So Ellie, if you'd like to start, I'd like to take it from there.
Oh, golly. Well, my debut to the business was as a production runner. That was my very first job, way back, over 40 years ago now. And but in terms of set decorating, I was actually supervising art director on a film directed by Alan Rickman in Scotland, and they didn't have a set decorator, and so it was easier for me to do that and replace myself, rather than as I knew the director and got on very well with him. Then look for another decorator. So that's my first, proper solo set decoration was a job called The Winter Guest, directed by Alan Rickman, starring Emma Thompson and her mum. My next job was assisting a lovely decorator, famous decorator called Anne Mollo. She started on Gladiator, the first one, 25 years ago. I was her assistant. She left the production and insisted that I take over Morocco, as I spoke French, and so I was the decorator in Morocco with Benjamin Fernandez, a supervising art director, and for Arthur, of course.
And Jille?
Well, it's interesting listening to Ellie's story, because mine was sort of linked in a way, because I came up through the ranks, having gone to art school for 5 years. I then went through the ranks of runner and art department assistant and junior draftsman, and working my way up. But it was on a film called Revolution, which Arthur was on, and the said Anne Mollo was on, and Anne asked me to come and help her dress some of the sets. And that was my first moment going into decoration with her. So Ellie and I were both linked with this really wonderful set decorator. She was a grande dame of set decoration with the most beautiful taste. And from then on, I was sort of hooked into set decoration and away from the drawing board. But I'm very pleased I did do the drawing elements, and went on to assist Crispian Salas, who was the main set decorator on Gladiator I. And he sort of taught me the ropes, and I gathered speed from there.
Love that. And I love that both of you were connected with Arthur very early on. Arthur, you've been a longtime collaborator of Ridley's, working almost 2 decades, even more. More than that, 3?
More. I started in commercials in 1985 with him. That's
wow,
pushing 40 years now. I've been working on features since, let me think, 95. So that'll be your 30 years. And he wasn't the first director you've worked for, obviously. It's just been a long time. You've been doing so many movies with him. Yeah, I mean, in California, in the American industry, you have to be in a union. And I was doing commercials, trying to break that barrier down. And so I met David Fincher on a commercial campaign, and then he asked me to do an indie film, which was 7. But then
Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman were cast, and that it became a unionized film, and they dragged me into the union. It was, from then on, I was available, for Hollywood Union films, and I started working with Ridley then on features.
Well, you have it seems like a great relationship with Ridley, and it was almost 25 years ago when Gladiator, the first Gladiator, and when he finally came to you and said, we're actually doing this, what were your thoughts, and what was his directive towards it all?
There wasn't much of a conversation about it. It was like, do you want to do it? Yeah. And we want to go for scale on this one. And that was pretty much the brief. The script was still evolving at that point, and we started scouting on the back end of Napoleon. Actually, when we wrapped, we went to Malta and Morocco to size up some of the previous sets that we had used on the first Gladiator, and didn't resume again till the very end of the year in 2023 it was. No, beg your pardon, 22. And then started up in the new year in London. And there was a small art department, and we grew from there to an enormous one.
It seemed like it was just so much bigger than the first. How do you even begin to start designing it all? And did you go back to the same locations? Did you have to rebuild the entire Colosseum? How do you even begin with all that, even with the decorating parts of it all?
Well, we started out with a very small office in Italy and a lot of kind of remote work on a plan, basically. And we wanted to use the whole site in Malta, and we wanted to go back to actually the Kingdom of Heaven set that we had built in Ouarzazate in Morocco, and use that as the Numidian fortress, and transform Jerusalem into a North African seaside city. And that was a pretty big number because there's no ocean in that location. So we were in discussion with visual effects supervisor Mark Bukowski, and his preference was to have physical sets and put the water in later, because the water software is advanced so much now. And that's the approach we had. And it seems ironic because when you watch the film, it's all about the ocean. And then we went to Malta, and we did the sequence of the Moxie battle inside the Colosseum, and that was all done in the dry as well. But we then replicated part of the Colosseum and the Emperor's box in the tank in Malta, which has a very, very large tank, and did some close-up stunt work and some underwater camera work in real water. So it was, for convenience sake, using so many cameras and having so much flame and stunts going on in both countries. That's why we chose to work in the dry. And we did have some water in the arena, but it was just coming out of Neptune, the god of the sea's mouth, into a large skip and recycled with a submersible pump. I think we had about a dozen of those spewing water, but all the action, the ships, Neil Corbold, our special effects supervisor, was the one who found these incredible remote-controlled, all-wheel steering hydraulic industrial platforms that allowed us to build the ships on top of them, and they could maneuver just like a ship would.
Ellie, you were in Morocco. Jille,
That's
you were in
right.
Malta.
That's correct.
Can you each tell us like what different sets you were both responsible for, and if as co-decorators, did you speak often for continuity purposes? Were you working together at all, or was it just a separate entity?
It was completely separate. Obviously, two different countries, two different styles, teams, scheduled events and stuff to achieve what was needed. We did speak occasionally, and when we finished shooting in Morocco, we did send any props that we thought just might be useful to augment what they already had if they wanted to use it to Malta, which included a sort of arsenal of weapons and other sort of industrial type sundries of the right period, and some lights and some fire baskets and a couple of big trucks full of stuff I think we sent. But Morocco was supposed to be North Africa, Numidia, and that was the breaching of the walls of the citadel by the huge Roman ships. And we did the Egyptian village there where Lucius was raised as a little boy with a guardian. And we did the smaller arena where we get introduced to Macranus, which interestingly enough was the on the same site as the first arena we did with Proximo in Gladiator I. So it was the same locations again, some of the same crew again from 25 years ago in Morocco, which was a joy to reunite with them. And it was hard and fast, but a joy to do. For me, I love Morocco.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it. And how different was it for you from the first time around? Was it just bigger and
well, a lot more experience under the belt, obviously. The first time I was there, I think I was a bit wide-eyed at the speed and the requests. But the second time, yeah, I mean, Arthur and I work comfortably together, and he tends to leave me to it until he needs to intervene, which is great to be able to stick your elbows out as far as you like and not get in the way of anybody. It's a great honor to be bestowed, to be just left to get on with it at times, without any interference. So it's about speed and trusting your team, really. I had a fantastic team of international people picked from all over the world, and certainly Europe, and they were sensational. I was very lucky.
Now, were they the siege of Numidia there? Was that a location, or was that also a build, or was it kind of half and half?
Numidia, the basis of Numidia was the old Kingdom of Heaven set, which was tinkered with and redressed as Numidia. And we did, I tried to use the theme, having discussed it with Arthur, of, how do we really instill that this is right on the water. This is a seafaring civilization, community, settlement, and which is why we used lots of ship sails and ship's masts and rigging, as if obviously they would be recycling all this maritime stuff as opposed to making, the same old markets that we see again and again. So we did try to bring as much of a nautical theme to it as possible.
Great. And Jille, in Malta, so you had the Colosseum, you had the where the emperors meet, and all of these big sets. Lucilla's home, I'm assuming, with the atrium. How did you go about all of that and finding all of like the furnishings? And because there's so much of it, is it things that you have to have built specifically, or do you find a lot of it?
Yes, well, ours was more of the classical Rome sets, as you'd mentioned, the Colosseum and the palaces, and Lucilla's home, all of those things. we went, both Ellie and I, at different times, went to India and bought some things. And then I had something. So I had an amazing art direction team, a set deck art direction team, and they designed with me a lot of the furniture and the braziers and the statues. And, you know, we had to manufacture most of what we had because we couldn't find the scale of props. We did hire some stuff in London from a wonderful hire company called Farley's. Then we had a lot of things made in India. And then we had an amazing model making team based out of Malta and the UK who were all making things as well. So it was a massive industry of classical Roman furniture being built.
Yes, I was taken aback, especially by Lucila's the atrium, all of the greenwork and all of the statuary. I can't help but see how many statues were made in the columns after column, and the multiples.
We made a lot of statues. And what was interesting about the statues this time around was, I think Arthur would agree that in the first one, a lot of the statues were all hand sculpted. Whereas this time we actually scanned, smaller statues or larger statues if we could find them to get the best resolution. And then we would 3D print them. We'd 5-axis scan them, and then they'd 3D print them. And that was amazing to be able to do that because on the first one, that technology wasn't available to us. So it's interesting how the technology is changing, for set decoration and for art department.
Yes, can I say, on the first one, just for the statistics of it all, we had a lot more prep time and build time than we did on the second version on Gladiator II, but we only had half a dozen monumental statues because, as Jille said, they were made in a traditional way with an armature and chicken wire and clay, and then they had to be skinned, and it was time consuming. Whereas now, I think we went to, 4 different countries for CNC cutting medium density foam statues. So we ended up with probably the larger size, I think almost 24, plus some rentals and purchases we were able to get. And I think the same was true in Morocco, Elie. There was a lot of prop making in Morocco, very big workshop facility, although I think not quite on the immense scale that we had in Malta, but there was an awful lot of making of ceramics and bronze and some furniture. It was constantly going on there. Enormous war drums were all custom made.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And the scale of it, again, were absolutely enormous.
Not to mention all the boats that were used in Malta that were made in Morocco and shipped. It was a multinational production line, which had elements of art department and construction and set dressing in all 3 countries. England, Morocco, and Malta. In order to meet the deadlines, we had to triple up.
Well, you brought up a really good question. So how much time or how much prep did you have as far as like manufacturing a lot of these items? I'm sure you needed some lead time for them. So what was your prep time on this? And did you shoot the larger scenes at the end, or were like the Colosseum fights brought up in the beginning?
To compare Gladiator I, we had, I believe it was 20 weeks of pre-production design drawings, model making, both in England and on location, and 26 weeks of build period between the 2 countries. On Gladiator II, we had 12 weeks of prep and 20 weeks of build. And then the scale of Gladiator II was exponentially bigger. And also the building regulations, not so much in Morocco, but in Malta, were to a different safety standard by a factor of 10. The engineers were very worried about storms and stresses on the velarium structure. So that really was much different. But there was also quite a bit of a custom sculpture that was built into the architecture, which was done in tandem with set dressing. It was very kind of collaborative in that these things were architectural features, but technically they were to do with the set decorating department, weren't they, Ellie? Some
Yes.
of your pieces that had structural issues to them, either for because
Yes.
of the elements. When you do a film in the elements, there's a lot of consideration of how things are fixed and attached for safety, and also we have a lot of practical effects going on, things landing and exploding, and the whole interior of the Numidian set was a minefield of explosives and air mortars, wasn't it?
It was, and also we had to consider all the time working with the special effects supervisor, Neil Corbold. It was the loading on, his ships, for example, that only had, a small variance on the original load once he'd walked off that particular phase of the build and it was time to do our dressing on top. We could only put a certain weight on, bearing in mind that the big ships, for example, we weren't going to have sails, and we did have sails in the end at one point, and everybody had to work out the pressure of the sail with the wind. Was it a good idea? And I think that's the beauty of having two decorators that have come up through the art department that are both have drawn and held positions as draftsmen or assistant art directors and upwards, is that you are aware of the overlaps and to kind of be on your guard to assist and collaborate with art department, visual effects, special effects. Nothing phases you because you've been there yourself, staring at a blank piece of paper ready to draw it. So I think that does speed things up. I'm sure there's many other decorators that do it, but it's if I spoke to Jille, for example, she knew exactly what I was talking about and vice versa. So it is a massive shortcut, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to be able to draw.
I'm sure. And how it overlaps with everybody. And I don't think people realize how quickly we need to do what we do. And when you watch, something like Gladiator II, this big epic film, and you see all these moving parts, I don't think the normal viewer sees what the design of it all and the build of it all and what it takes. People think, oh, you have years to build this. No, you only have a couple of weeks, like you just said, and you all work so well together to put all these moving pieces, to just get it going.
Well, funnily enough, somebody recently said, we'll talk, my question when they ring is, and do you draw? And it's all, oh, no, I don't draw on a computer. And I always say, don't worry about that. You'll be drawing it in the sand. It's that from our point of view, it's still as fast and as ad hoc as it ever was, and that's where you come across the most incredible people and discoveries, I think, which is kind of keeps me interested, is the people that you dig out of all these amazing countries that are a little bit in the shadows still, are still using those tried and tested old-fashioned methods, and they still stand today as strong as they ever did.
And they work.
They work, yes.
Jille, could you tell me a little bit about Macrinus, if I'm saying that correctly, his home? It looks so vast, the stairway, the atrium, all of that, and how it was decorated, and how you might have chose furnishings and different colors that may have been a little bit different than Lucila's.
Yes. Well, it was interesting because the location that we shot Macrinus's house was Arthur. What's the name of the fort?
It's Fort Manuel.
Fort Manuel. Yes,
which is the 1800s, early 19th century Napoleonic era fortress with overlays of the two world wars.
Yes, so it was an extraordinary location to start with. And we wanted to give a sort of a slightly more ethnic feel to and very rich and tasteful, but different to classic Rome, because he wasn't classic Rome. So we developed his character, and worked with the costume department as well to see what Janty was dressing him in. And we tried to give him a much more exotic flavor and an intelligence. He's a very intelligent character. And that was very different to the Roman palaces that we designed the furniture for.
12 weeks prep. I mean, we were both scrambling around, overlapping each other. Me off and back to India, then you off and back to India. Almost like planes circling to land. It was, it was non-stop. But we do it because we love it.
First of all, I can't believe that you ladies only had 12 weeks prep. Kudos to you. That's crazy. But then, I was also reading that Ridley works with 12 cameras. So, obviously you're doing 360s everywhere you look has to be Rome, and you have to be prepared for that. How do you even go about all that? Does he just show up and just start shooting?
It can be quite comical. There are 12 cameras and you hand over a set that's beautifully dressed that you're pleased with, everyone's approved, and there you are. You think that at last you can hand over and walk away and get ahead. No. And then you realize there's 12 cameras, and that as you scan the set and you're walking around, you think, didn't leave that like that. I don't remember putting that there. And you have a little dig, and the deeper you dig, the more likely you're going to find a cameraman wrapped in hessian, underneath all this stuff, which drives me insane. I'm like a little wasp going around getting all cross, thinking that they can't be seen. But, obviously it's cut in such a way that he cuts right on the edge of them not seeing each other. Because, as experienced as we are, you can stand there and demand to look down the lens, and you are very definitely looking at one camera position, looking right at another. And we've obviously know that's impossible, but he cuts it in such a way he knows what the shots are before they've even shot it. It's the most beautifully orchestrated and prepared piece of work as far as Ridley's concerned. And, really all that fretting, he already knows that it's not a problem.
So, Arthur, I wanted to save the Colosseum for you. And I know the first one was built, I keep on reading that it was a little bit smaller as far as height. And this one was higher because of the water. Were there any complications that you had, or did you find it, because of the technology we have now, that it might have been a little bit easier and quicker to build? Or were there any challenges there?
Only, as I said, the issues of engineering and safety standards, that was one big issue. And there were a lot of bureaucratic delays because of it eating into our build time. The weather was another one, which got in the way. Because you're on an island in the middle of the ocean, you have high winds and sometimes driving rain, which doesn't help when you're doing plaster and paint work and trying to as you can see in the photo there, put up basically what are a lot of sails hanging over your set and all the crew and the extras. And so on the first one, as a rule of thumb, the calculation by the engineers was one cataclysmic storm every 10 years. And the support structure was engineered accordingly. Whereas in the Gladiator II, the assumption was one cataclysmic storm every year. And so all the specifications had to increase, which meant sourcing different kinds of material. And they came from, they weren't locally available. They had to be sourced in Europe and shipped in mostly from Italy and Germany. So that was a problem. And also the attitude of the authorities about digging, and we wanted to use the entire site, and which had a lot of areas of rubble, particularly on the sections of the site that we didn't use on the first one. So we wanted to clear all those up and make them usable and accessible for crew and equipment. And there were a lot of bureaucratic issues doing that. But in the end, we made it work. And I think also, they kind of allowed us a little bit of latitude because Gladiator I had really brought the film industry to Malta. They hadn't had much. People used to go there just to use the tank, aforementioned tank. But now they go there a lot, generally. And we tried to explore also a lot of other places that we hadn't used on the first one. Other forts, as Jille was saying, Fort Manuel, for Macrinus's gladiator school and his residence. Fort Delamara, which was the underground tunnels that you see in scenes with Macrinus getting captured and his men killed, and Lucilla's coming through her secret passage to get into the undercroft of the Colosseum. So we were in many more places. As for Morocco, as Elie was saying, we went back to basically old familiar locations, but the challenge was trying to transform them. The provincial arena with the baboons, originally in the script, was supposed to be in Numidia, but halfway through the prep was switched to the outskirts of Rome. So enter Roger Holden and a couple of dozen cypress trees suddenly. Then, I mean, there was also the kind of economic filmmaking approach that really took to both arenas. He suddenly came up with the idea that he wanted the Colosseum color scheme and the provincial arena color scheme and detail to match the first one, so that he could intercut footage from the earlier film, saving him the time of having to shoot, say, crowd reactions. I don't know, for me, it was just, we bit off an awful lot to chew in terms of what we were trying to achieve. And I have to say, all departments did their very best and met every deadline. We were never waiting for the sets, were we?
No.
I do remember when we dressed the Royal Box, because construction had done an incredible job building the Colosseum. I mean, it's a massive structure. And when we dressed the Royal Box, the sort of inside of it, they handed it to us at 7 o'clock at night, before they were shooting it at 8 o'clock the next morning, and we hadn't dressed it. And so my whole team, there are about 20 people in the Royal Box dressing it, drapes team and, you know, the prop men and my assistant set decorators and I. And then as it got dark, we were requesting work lights, and production, there you see work lights, but the day we were there or the evening we were there, we didn't have any lights. So I had to park my car at the bottom of the steps and shine the car headlights up into the roll box so we could see what we were doing. And that's how we ended up dressing the roll box. It was, you know, hilarious, really.
Those are always the stories you remember, though, and it looked fabulous. No one knows that it took, you know, you did it the day before.
Yeah. And I would also say with Malta, what's incredible about Malta is it has these old structures, you know, these incredible locations, but it doesn't have very much else that you can buy. So everything for us had to be shipped in, you know, from India, from Italy, from the UK. There was not very much there that we could utilize. I mean, great people who helped us, but actually, you know, it's a small island in the, you know, quite remotely in the middle of the Mediterranean. So when Ridley suddenly had the idea that he would bring a set forward, you know, the dressing for those locations was at least a week away. So we really had to, you know, have sprinter vans with dressing on, you know, racing through France and Spain and Italy, or France and Italy, and then getting the ferry over to Sicily, then the ferry over to Malta. You know, it was quite a palaver, I can tell you.
Now, this open air market here, this looks fabulous. Was this a location? Or was this part of the build?
This is a location. This is all part of the main site, Fort Ricasoli, where Arthur designed, you know, all of the buildings, the palaces, the streets, you know, all of the sets. Mostly the sets were in this area, and I had a team working for 3 months, you know, getting the stuff and dressing these areas. Which they were incredible. You know, they worked non-stop. It was absolutely immense.
What's so great about this location, I mean, those are the barracks buildings you've been looking at with all the arches, is the textures of the stone.
Yeah.
The quality of it's kind of, the whole island is made of limestone, and the salt air over time does terrific aging for you, much as that, you know, the wind and the sun does in Morocco. And we try to capture that degree of aging in the new sets, just to some degree, depending on which building it was. And so that's why you go there, because you're given such a tremendous start with what you find to begin with, and play off of that and do your additions to match. I think we had a tremendous start with the Kingdom of Heaven set. It was almost like it's a permanent facility now. We did it nearly 20 years ago, and it's still there. Needed a little maintenance, and we added another 400 foot, and I think 3 major towers or 4 towers to it to encompass the port that it didn't have. And it gives you a kind of a feel for the ancient world that, you know, you would be struggling 20 years of aging in the desert, even on the set that we built originally to be medieval, just helps. And I think what Ellie did in terms of dressing it was very imaginative, because we couldn't find much reference on Numidian architecture or culture. We found a few statues, I remember, and there wasn't a great deal. There's a museum, but it didn't have a lot, did it, Ellie?
No, yeah, there's a lot of artistic license. going on there. But I mean, all that North African coast, I mean, it was all ancient Numidia, wasn't it? I mean, it's all those tribes that still refer to themselves as Numidians. So actually, the backbone was where we were, that anything was game to be chopped up and made into something else that just felt right.
Yes. I mean, the Berber design motifs were what Numidia was. Numidia technically was Algeria and parts of Morocco. So we were right there in the heart of it. And the motifs are very sort of soft geometric motifs that you can still see in their ceramics and their metalwork and their textiles. And we said, well, that's it. That's Numidian. Yes.
Well, we designed a whole run of wall lights, didn't we? Sconces based on a metal weight that I found that was supposed to keep the tribeswomen's skirts from blowing up in the wind. But the shape of this weight was so tribal and interesting that once we fiddled with it and incorporated it in a drawing for a lamp, we just made them and repeated them in multiples so we could put them up on the castle walls. But actually, it was all derived from ornament of a woman's costume.
These were some lamps that we had manufactured in India, some braziers that we found the classical details, and these are the original drawings that my team drew. I had some wonderful draftspeople, art directors, working with me, and we sent the drawings to India, and then you can see them there and they're dressed into the set.
Jille, the throne chairs were spectacular to look at, especially when Denzel is sitting in one of them. You see a lot of the detail. Is that something, are they something that you designed and had fabricated? Where did that, was that part of the Pompeian?
Yes, so obviously researched, historical thrones, Roman detail, and then we would come up with concepts, and then Arthur would come over and he'd look at it, and we decide to go a certain way, and then we'd develop it further, and then we'd finalize, and Arthur would maybe adjust certain details, and then we'd go into production. And I had an amazing team of model makers and sculptors that worked on these items, and then a great drapes team that would do all the, the upholstery and stuff like that. And then these were made in the UK, and then they were shipped out to Malta. So it was a lot of people working on these items. Personally, I think they filmed very well. I was really pleased with them.
They did. And the drawings here, this is a lot of the draperies, and were those also shipped in?
Yes, what was interesting about the drapery was the absolutely enormity of it. I mean, we went through thousands and thousands of meters of fabric, and when you, as Ellie will know, when you're on a very tight schedule, I mean, people don't stock hundreds and hundreds of meters of fabric. So it was very challenging getting the quantities needed. And then also on this drawing, on the right, you see these wonderful gates, which my art director, James, designed. And they were in the Senate, and they were spectacular, really beautiful metalwork. And then they were done by metalworkers in the UK. Yeah, there you can see them.
I think you work a little differently than we do here in New York. I love the fact that you have you have your own art department. You have builders just for set deck allocated for that to pull it all off. But it looks amazing. And the chairs that were just in the council room, were those, I think I asked you before, were those all built, or were those something that came from India? Or
we designed those, and they were manufactured in India. And then the two thrones there at the end were actually hired from Rome, and then repainted. They allowed us to repaint them, but all the chairs were made, and then we painted them when they got to Malta.
Yeah, and then don't forget, a lot of our picture vehicles were actually fabricated in Morocco to be sent on to Malta at a later stage. They played in both places, and they were revamped and reused and converted but most of that work, i.e. Lucilla's wagon, and correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, Macrinus's wagon, Candace's chariot, and all of the, a good deal of the slave wagon as well, was started in Jille's workshop in England. And then we ran out of time, and they were shipped to Morocco and finished in Morocco, and then sent up to Malta. So they moved around quite a bit and were added on to and embellished and then revamped to become something else. I think Lucilla's wagon became the emperor's carriage at a certain point.
That's right, it did.
Great to see all those different transformations also of the different wagons being reused and revamped. But are there any other, in particular, sets that you're very proud of? I mean, I think for me as a decorator, the proudest moment is when the actors come on set and they are just so immersed in their space. And I've read multiple stories from all the different actors that just said this was the most incredible set they've ever been on. It was like walking back into Rome. It was just massive. And they never, they don't feel like they'll ever have that feeling again. That must make you so proud. But is there something in particular that you're particularly proud of? And let's start with Arthur. Let's start with you.
Well, I'm proud of it all, and especially of my team, because I bit off, an awful lot to chew on, and everybody delivered. I mean, we, by the skin of our teeth, the sets were always ready. They never waited for us, and they wanted to juggle things around, and that was all accommodated, and I just was very ambitious because that's what Ridley wanted to do. He wanted to celebrate really the scale and the grandeur of ancient Rome, which we had limits on the first one. Really, the scale of Gladiator II really is a consequence of the success of the first movie. And they allowed us, to go bigger and to build more and to detail as much as we did. We created that world to a degree that incorporated a lot of the inspiration. I mean, it was a celebration of the first one, but we supersized it, to use an American phrase.
And Jille, what about you?
So what I think I'm most proud of were my team, the people that worked on it, and they worked their socks off, I have to say, especially, well, I mean, all of them, from my dressing props to the drapes team especially, worked in a tent and a workshop without any air conditioning, and it was honestly unbearable. And then yes, so I think my team, my drafting team, my assistant set decorators, my dressing team, drapes, I think it was a magnificent effort, and everybody really put their heart into it, because I think they were aware of how special it was to work, on a Ridley Scott film, and to sort of revisit the Gladiator moment. The set that I think we probably had most fun on was the party scene, which was a sort of extravagant, decadent Rome, and we did all sorts of crazy food, and Connor did us a wonderful rhino head. There you are. I mean, look at that rhino head. I mean, it just looked so real. And we had peacocks, and it was just great fun to do. That was sort of hugely enjoyable to do. But I think I'm most proud of the effort that everybody made and the pure talent that we were all working with.
Yeah, here to that.
It's really I'm very honoured to work outside England a lot, and I do have teams of people standing by that are appropriate for certain jobs, and this is one of those cases. So I mean, that's what I love, is that a lot of the jobs that I do with Arthur, I get to make stuff, literally make it up and make it, and this is one of those great cases on this film. It was wonderful.
I do want to ask a final question from all of you. I hear there may be a Gladiator 3. Will you all be joining? If so?
Well, you have to ask the boss.
Yeah, we get asked. I mean, if asked, phrase it that way, if asked, I would certainly. Because it could go on for quite a while, I would say the time period of 1 and 2 is just a blink of an eye in the history of the Roman Empire. There's so much more to portray. It's so rich, and there's many aspects that would be very interesting to do from my point of view.
If we wait another 20 years, though, Ellie and I will be in our wheelchairs with our Zimmer frames, dressing the set.
I'm in my wheelchair with a Zimmer frame already.
Well, maybe it'll become sooner.
Yes, that would be nice. I mean, I'm sure Jille feels the same. When you are tackling something like this that you've got the smell of and it so well, it's nice to be able to go at high speed, because that your knowledge of the period roughly is one thing you don't have to worry about.
Yeah. I love the way the three of you all collaborate and know each other so well and trust each other. It just shows. It shows through your work. It shows through your conversation just now. And I want to thank you all for joining us today and talking about your movie. It's a great movie. I think it'll stand the test of time as an epic, a classic, just like the original Gladiator. And thank you.
Thank you very much. We've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.